Welcome to the Black Belt Business Podcast. My name is Matthew Brenner, and today I am with John Hewitt. This is a really exciting one. If you're a martial arts school owner, I usually talk to other martial arts school operators, whether they run 50 locations or whether they run one very profitable location. But today's episode is going to be a little bit different. We're going to talk to someone who built a totally different type of business in a different industry. And that way we can see what we can learn from his experience and something totally different. And I always feel like I learn the most, not from other martial arts school owners, when I look outside the industry. So when I go visit a Orange Theory Fitness, or I look to see how Starbucks is doing something, or Chipotle, and I'll see little tiny things in their operations, and I make sure to get on their email list to see how they're doing their marketing, their advertising, their employee recruitment. So today we have a really, really special guest, John Hewitt. He sold his company, Jackson Hewitt, in 1997. I think that was the first one you sold out of the two, which for them was 483 million, which for for adjusted inflation numbers is about 925 million. And then later sold Liberty Tax for around 250 million, which ends up being around 480 adjusted for inflation. So over $1 billion between his two companies, and now runs a company called Loyalty Brands, which is helps franchises grow their locations and I think for Loyalty Brands, do you guys invest in the brands themselves, or is it mainly like coaching and guidance?
It's a combination of all those.
Okay, cool. So I kind of gave the broad strokes of your business background. Tell us a little bit more. Fill in the blank for me.
Sure, I have 55 years to talk about. So
Okay.
I'll do the 4-minute, 55-year career if I can. I started when I was at the University of Buffalo. I took an H&R Block course and I loved it. And 12 years later, I was running 250 H&R Block locations. And my dad was CFO of a public company, and he had bought one of the first Apple computers by mail. And he liked it better than the mainframe that was running his public company. So in 1981, he convinced me to leave H&R Block and help him build the first tax software for an Apple computer. We built it. No one wanted it, way ahead of its time. Got blessed and found a company called Mel Jackson Tax Service here in Virginia Beach. The biggest blessing, one of the biggest blessings, was the weather here's a lot nicer than in Buffalo. And so
Hmm.
I moved my family down here in August of 1982. Been here ever since. We merged the two companies, changed the name to Jackson Hewitt, and as you pointed out, in 1997, 15 years later, sold it for $483 million. So now I had developed one of the top 100 retail chains in the United States. And I had a non-compete for 3 years, but it didn't cover Canada because Jackson Hewitt's never gone to Canada. Having grown up in Buffalo, I did Canadian tax returns. I knew the Canadian tax system. So pretty unusually, we opened Liberty Tax in Canada. And within 3 years became a top 100 retail chain. So now I've done it once in U.S. and once in Canada. In 2000, when my non-compete ended, came back to the United States, and now I had to compete with my own name, my own software, my own system at Jackson Hewitt. And yet we grew faster than them and H&R Block combined. We opened 4,000 locations in 12 years, top 10 fastest growing franchisors ever. So now I had built two of the top 100 retail chains. Its value was $500 million too. And again, I sold my stock and started Loyalty Brands. And Loyalty Brands, unlike Jackson Hewitt and Liberty Tax, was just one franchisor. We have 8 different franchise systems, and we specialize in 3 things right now. One is accounting and tax, which I've done for 55 years. Secondly is construction and led by our roofing division. And thirdly is pets. And I'm really become enamored with the pet business. 50 that is fastest growing of all of our brands. And I guess the last thing I'll say about my career is I've in addition to being the only guy that developed two of the top 100 retail chains in the United States, I brought in over 5,200 franchisees and into changed tens of thousands of people's lives.
Mm. So when you decided to leave H&R Block and do your own thing with your dad, were you worried about working with family? Like, what was that dynamic like?
No, actually, it was. I had struggled with my dad when I was a teenager, and so I was sort of the prodigal son. So it actually was a bonding experience, and it brought the it brought my dad and I a lot closer together. And so he became a director of. Not only did we own the computer company together, but became a director of Jackson Hewitt. He became a director of Liberty, and one of my best friends for the rest of his life.
Did you guys bring in outside investment for growing those companies, or is it just you two that owned it?
For the software company, we did not, but with Jackson Hewitt, we took venture capital, and with Liberty, we took venture capital, and even with a couple of our franchise systems, not the parent company at Loyalty Brands, but with two of our brands, we took in some venture capital. So we
Hmm.
raised about. Uh, Jackson Hewitt went on to become a $1 billion company after we sold it, and we had raised about a combined about $7 million, and at Liberty we raised a combined about $10 million. So I developed $1.5 billion worth of companies with less than a $20 million investment.
Wow. So when you left and sold it, so it was you and your dad, at least at Jackson Hewitt. So how much equity did you own at the time when you actually sold it?
Well, by the time I sold both of the companies, they were public companies.
Hmm.
So I only owned about 5% of Jackson Hewitt when it was sold, and about 16% of Liberty when it was sold.
Hmm. Why did you end up selling it at the time? Why not just hold on to it?
Each of the times, the and this is a valuable lesson I learned about private equity. Each of the times we had a board that agreed on everything. For it, starting with Jackson Hewitt, we had a unanimous board for 15 years. And then we ran into adversity. The IRS almost destroyed the industry. It came from external forces in 1995, and the venture capitalists tried to steal the company and cause them a miniature war. And then same thing happened at Liberty Tax after 20 years together, 20 years of unanimous decisions getting along. There was some disruption in performance one year, and that started a civil war. So both times it was internal conflict that caused me to sell.
Was it you and your dad on the same side of the war in that situation? Like you and your dad versus the board, or you and your dad or the board versus the venture capital?
My dad was always on my side. Yes.
Hmm. So was this like a hostile takeover situation?
Um, it wasn't. Yes.
Okay. And then what did you guys not agree about? Like what was it that created so much tension? You're like, all right, now I just got to sell and get out of here.
Well, it's private equity tends to um, when you first invest, they have a 5 year window. And we're going to be in this for the long term. And so you both are looking long term. Well, then after a year, then they're only 4 years. And then after 2 years, it's down to 3 years. And so pretty soon they're down to their last year. And they want to maximize, they forget about the future. Forget about the future. We want to maximize this quarter, this year to be able to sell at the highest multiple. So our goals changed over the years. And so part of it was the long term goals changed, and but also part of it is uh, private equity. It focuses on numbers, and great entrepreneurs focus on people. And so they were willing to screw the franchisees and the employees and everyone, the customers, just to get the highest return on their investment. So it was it's a constant philosophical battle between private equity and founders.
If you were to do it again, would you still take on private equity, or would you try your best to completely avoid that so you don't have those strings attached?
I'm going to avoid that for the rest of my life.
Okay, I learned a lesson there. So when you ended up selling it, was it difficult to sell because you were under pressure of like, I need to get out of this? It was a little bit of a fire sale, or was it easy because but it was so good it didn't matter?
And one of each. The first one we got premium price because we were doing so well, and the battle was very brief, and it we had rebounded so dramatically. The IRS almost destroyed the industry. And what happened is they took profits and revenue from one year and then got it back in the second year. So that second year was so incredible because it was compared against such a valley the previous year. Plus, it had previous year's profit into the second year that it looked extraordinary. So we got a premium price the first time. The second time, the battle lasted over a year and with a lot of bad publicity, and I was eviscerated in public. So they beat down the sales price. So it was, we did not get a good sales price, nearly as good of a sales price the second time as we did the first time.
Hmm. So when you sold the first time, and what was the tax hit like for you? Like how much money actually hits your account versus the sale
Yeah,
of just like,
yeah, it wasn't public as to how much money hits my account. So I'm pretty private, so I don't say that.
sure.
But I have paid millions and millions and tens of millions of dollars in taxes on my earnings over that time period. And a lot of people they feel bad about paying taxes, but boy, is it a nice problem to have, because if
Yeah.
you're paying a lot of taxes, you've made a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad always told me, my dad does tax preparation for probably the last, I don't know if my brother ever told you this, who you're friends with, uh, for the last probably 20 years. He does it as a side thing, mainly so he can talk to people and have fun. He just enjoys it. Same clients for 20, 30 years. And has always told me, like, yeah, you want to pay less taxes, make less money. Right. And I'm like, okay, I got it. Yeah, since I was a teenager. Um, so when you paid a lot of taxes, obviously once, and pocketed, a good amount of money. Was there something that you did to celebrate, or was there something you had in mind, like, okay, this is what I have some of this money earmarked for?
Actually, no. When I was young, when I was in high school, I was cocky, and somehow I knew, even though we were poor, I knew I was going to be very successful and make millions of dollars. I didn't know how until I took that H&R Block tax course in college. I didn't know how I was going to do it, didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I was going to get rich, and I thought I'd just retire. But along the way, and fooled around. But along the way, I found out, what would I do? There's nothing more fun than changing lives and improving lives. And so the treasure at the end of the rainbow after 15 years at Jackson Hewitt, it's anticlimactic. I mean, you have this net worth, and it's sitting there on paper, and when you get that check, it's anticlimactic. It's not that exciting. And then same thing, 20 years later at Liberty, get this huge check, and it's somehow not that important, because it's coming. You have this equity, you built this income or net worth, and you're going to cash it in someday. So it's anticlimactic, actually.
Did it open up doors for you of people or a network that you didn't have previously, of people who, are nine-figure or eight-figure net worth that you didn't talk to previously, or were those doors already open anyway? It didn't matter.
Yeah, I don't like people, so I'm not sure what I would.
You're like, I want to help people so much, and I'm gonna do it forever. They're like, next sentence, I don't like people.
Well, I'm a introvert, and
Okay.
I brought in, as I said, 5,200 franchisees, and most of them over the last 40 years. So I bring in 150, 200 new people every year, which means I meet 10 times that many. I meet thousands of people, and I like to spend time by myself. So once I crave alone time. So, I love my people. I was at a wedding in June with two of my favorite franchisees from Liberty. I was at a high school graduation with another Liberty's uh, son, and so I go to things and do things, but I didn't want to make any new friends. I have enough people that I'm helping, and billionaires don't need my help. There's a kind of a false sense of financial planning in this country. People think that rich people need financial planners. Well, once you're rich, once you're worth 10, 20, 30, $50 million, $100 million, it doesn't matter whether you earn 10% return on your money or 8% or 12%. It's the people on the way to getting wealthy that need the financial advice. So I do not crave or enjoy or look forward to making someone worth millions of dollars extra millions. I love the fact I've created 1,000 millionaires. I change ordinary people's lives into becoming financially independent. That's what is rewarding to me. Not meeting other successful people that have enjoyed the same good fortune that I have.
So when you're growing the Jackson Hewitt and growing, Liberty Tax franchise locations, are you I guess what's your role in that? Are you essentially like become a salesperson for franchisees? Like, all right, now I'm just selling units to this franchise, or are you doing the operations and you hire that out to some broker that's going to sell units for the franchise? Because people who are listening to this, are going to be martial arts school owners, and a lot of them have one location and they just want to make that as profitable as possible. But some people are curious about the franchise route, right? But they don't realize necessarily what it's like to actually franchise, and having, let's say, 10 locations of a franchise is good, but if you want to make like really, really good money, it's got to be really like hundreds or thousands, right? At least that's, what I've seen people I've talked to. So I guess my question for you is, did your role change when you were working on growing the franchise, become a salesperson, or is that something that you kind of got someone else to do?
Yeah, I'm the number one cheerleader and expert in the industry. So what happens is I don't do any of the sales, but we take people through a process. And first step is, are you meant to be self-employed? Secondly, is this the right industry? Then I'm instrumental in answering questions to see if we're the right company in the industry. And then fourthly, is it the right time? And I have people that take them through all those steps. And I'll spend about an hour with a group of potential franchisees, and be the last really solidifying part of the decision. But I don't ask them to make the decision. I don't have separate calls with them. Other people do that, but I'm the guru, the icon, the great granddaddy of tax preparation.
Hmm. Very cool. So how do you figure out if someone is meant to be self-employed or not? Like, how do they know until they're actually doing it?
That's not as easy as you might think. The 2/3 of Americans, studies show, want to be self-employed. What I've learned in my 5,200 franchisees that have joined me, a lot of them are mistaken. They don't
Mhm.
have the drive or the risk taking or the wherewithal to
Or
make it.
discipline.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You have to, there's no one in charge. You're the guy in charge. The buck stops here. So there's no one to look to do the work. And it's my favorite 10 two-letter words. If it is to be, it is up to me. And you can't look around anymore and blame anyone else. And so it's the biggest reason people fail that have joined us is they weren't meant to be self-employed. They should be an employee. They just didn't have the mental fortitude to do it.
Yeah, everyone wants to eat, but not everyone wants to hunt, right? As a saying that I like. And I feel like a lot of people have this grandiose vision of what it's like to be a business owner, but once they actually do it, like they want the ego boost of it and tell people, "Hey, I own this business." But most business owners also don't make any money, right? They'll have a business, but like they work there and make the same amount as if they had a job anyway. So they might as well not have the stress or risk of owning a business. And there's obviously people that do own a business and are very profitable, um, but it's not always as magical as people seem. Like they just seem like, oh, this guy owns a business, he must make a lot of money. And you've seen a lot of people in the background. You always know that's not necessarily true, right? Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, my girlfriend works for a big insurance company, and she kind of sees like the background of like me being an entrepreneur and my family being entrepreneurs, a lot of my friends, and her working in a big corporation. So she always assumes that people are making a lot of money when they own a business. I'm like, nope, this person I know doesn't. Nope, this person's a debt. Nope, this person is blah blah blah. And it's so interesting for her to see that those different perspectives, right? But this person does super well, and you would never even realize, right?
Correct.
So yeah. So I guess my question for you next is like, is there anything that like you make a lot of money from the sales? Is there anything that you can't do with that money that you thought maybe you could or you expected?
I don't think that I've ever seen, I've never wanted anything that I couldn't eventually afford. So I would say no, that and I'm not a, and that fits me too, also because I'm non materialistic. I mean, if my house burned down today, I would I wouldn't even shed a tear. I would just move on. I would say, "Wow, they made me insure my house for replacement value, so I made an extra $2 million. Thanks for my house burning down." You know,
Yeah, right.
I'm not a materialistic, and it aggravates me that I have to insure my house for replacement value rather than what I've spent on it.
Hmm.
And so it I would make money if it burned down. So it's crazy. And so
Hmm.
that's an aggravating thing. But no, I've I've always been able to afford, not always, but as I became wealthy, I was always able to afford what I'd like to do. The thing that I would like to do that I would like to do more of is give back and in charity. And I started in 1998. I started a World Hunger Organization the same time I started Liberty Tax, and I'm proud to say that 25 years later, 26 years later, we have over 100 employees, and we've distributed over 500 million meals over the last 26 years. And I started it with, I was the money bags, and my partner was a Methodist minister, and we built something really, really extraordinary. So giving back more is incredibly rewarding and required.
Hmm. So if there's a martial arts school owner listening and they want to expand their schools by opening up more locations besides their one, maybe they're thinking about franchising or licensing, what advice would you give them?
The second one is always the hardest. What I've learned, and out of the 5,200 franchisees I brought in, almost all of them, at least 80%, wanted to have more than one location. And so we have systems to teach them to do that. There's no school in there's no school in the United States on how to be a CEO. I call it the school of hard knocks, the school of mistakes and overcoming obstacles and barriers. And so, but I've learned this, that the people that go to a second location, that's where the rubber hits the road. If you can manage two locations, then you can manage 10. But only about a third of the people that have gone to two or more are really have the skill set of delegation, because delegation is one of the biggest diseases in American management. People just can't delegate, especially they can't delegate to someone out of sight. It's a mild level of delegation to be able to delegate to people in your same building, in your same martial arts studio. But when you get someone 5 miles away or 10 miles away, and you're trying to maintain the same culture and the same discipline and the same quality, it almost always suffers. And so that's the toughest challenge. Do grow, wait until your first location is profitable and life sustaining, and then before you go to your second office, and don't do more than two before you've shown that you can do a second one well.
Mm. Yeah, I think what's important is the same skills that get you to one location is a totally different skill set to get you to two. Sh- Right? It's like a totally different thing. And a lot of times what people will do is it's an ego boost, like they'll want to open up a second location and then they do it and they end up with twice the amount of work and half the amount of money from each. And it would have just been way better if they just focused more on one, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
I've
I-
seen a lot of times you don't make any more money than by running two than you did by running one, and you're just
exactly.
spending so much more time and work and stress for nothing.
Hmm. So, what kind of like one of the things that we do to help ensure quality across new locations, and I'm curious how you do it, but one of the things that we do is we'll have cameras with audio and video. And one of the things I love doing to ensure quality control is we do something I like to call game film review. And I don't know anyone else in the martial arts industry that does this, but maybe in other industries they do. But I learned this from when I joined a mastermind where they had us review sales calls with clients. And essentially, what I was thinking was like, okay, in the NFL, when or any sports, but specifically in the NFL, after Sunday's game on Monday, you sit down, you play Monday morning quarterback, and you watch the film of the game, the previous game, and you look at like what went wrong, like maybe an interception was thrown or a fumble or you didn't convert a first down, and you try to figure out, okay, what could I have done better? And then you also look at what went really well and see how you could repeat those same actions, how you scored a touchdown or got into field position to kick a field goal. And that way you learn from it every single week. And so we kind of like to adopt the same mindset. And I used to call it video audits, but then I realized nobody likes the word audit. So we changed it to game film review, where, okay, we're professional athletes in the martial arts world. Let's review our film of a class. What went well in the class? What didn't go well? And whenever we watch film, you're always gonna find little things that you didn't notice that were happening live. What was the parents that are doing that are watching? What is your assistant instructor doing? How was someone messing up and not getting corrected? And you didn't notice at the time and no idea, but you see the parent body language change. We'll look at sales conversations. We'll look at quit conversations when someone wants to uh, cancel their membership, and we see the audio and the video, and we can break it down like a professional football player, and see what actually we can improve on instead of just guessing what happened, last night or a couple weeks ago. So if you're martial arts school and you're not doing that, this has been such a game changer for us. And I'll even do game film reviews for my clients for Double Your Dojo, which is like the consulting side of my business, where I help other martial arts school owners grow and outside of our geographic area. And I'll do game film review with them so we can see, okay, how we can actually improve. And the difference between like week 1 versus like week 8 through 10, when you actually dissect a recording of what you actually did, is tremendous. So I guess for you guys, when you're going from location 1 to location 1,000, what kind of steps do you put in to ensure that quality control?
Well, one of my favorite authors, Stan Phelps, in one of his books, he said, no one shows up for a meeting. Almost no one shows up for a meeting or a party or an event exactly on time. If the event's supposed to start at 11 o'clock, people show up either before 11 or after 11 and not rarely exactly on time. And he said, in the same manner, you rarely meet a customer's expectations. You either fail to meet their expectations or you exceed their expectations.
Mm,
So I took that, and ever since I read that, I loved that we analyze the percentage of customers' expectations that we exceed, and set a goal to every year improve that, knowing we're never going to get to 100%. We're never going to exceed 100% of people's expectations. But our goal is to have a continued improvement on that. The way that we find out how we did is we do something unique that almost no one does. And I'm sure almost no one does what you do in terms of the game film, but we call our customers and we ask them how we did for them. And customers love it because one of the reasons they love it, I think, is no one else calls them from any industry. No, I mean, the only industry that regularly has called customers in, and I've taught thousands of people to do this in 10,000 offices. So the only one that comes up is car dealers but people only buy a car once every 3 to 5 years. So no one's calling a customer and asking them. And so what happens is our customers are they come back more often. The retention is greater because they like being called. And what I've learned is our employees are not good at asking for referrals. No matter how much we plead with them, motivate them, bonus them, they're just not good at asking for referrals. And so this very personable person makes the phone call. How do we do? 95% of the people said, wonderful, I loved it. And they ask for a referral. And so our referrals go up, our retention goes up, and we police the system because the most important job of a franchisor after creating a system is to make sure that no one is bringing the name of the brand down. Whoever offers the worst service that's the brand's ultimate name or reputation in the community. And so our job is to police the system, and we do it very well through calling customers.
Mhm. And that's so simple and like makes sense, especially now with automation, AI chatbots. I feel like are getting lazy and want to do less and less as a business owner. And anytime you could exceed someone's expectation, I mean, listen, how many emails do you get in your inbox of like rate our service? Anytime you take a flight or you go to, go somewhere where they have your email, like, yeah, they'll send you an automated email, but most of the time you're not going to check that. But if someone actually calls and says like, hey, how was your service today? I want to see if everything's going good. Is there anything I can do to help you? It means a lot. And usually those phone calls are probably not more than 2 minutes,
Yeah,
right? And
certainly
worth,
in three, right?
yeah, it's worth the investment to actually do it. But there's two things that martial arts school owners can do right now to improve their retention. Okay, if they're not doing these two things, they're losing more students than they need to. Okay, they're just bleeding students out. One is what we call A-box. Okay, and these are things that martial arts school owners have probably heard about before, but just aren't doing. Okay, well, so one is A-box, and A-box is absent box. So if you require students to come at least twice a week, and they only came in once a week that week or less, you pick up the phone and you call them and say, hey, I noticed that Johnny wasn't here twice this week. I'm checking in to see that everything's okay. And it's so simple, but as if you look when someone quits or when someone cancels something, it usually doesn't happen out of nowhere. Okay. It does sometimes. Sometimes people ghost, right? But that's usually the outlier. Usually there's signs, like their attendance start to slip, or maybe they start to miss payments. There's telltale signs. So if someone is showing up less and less and less and less, and they go to quit, and then you try to talk them out of it, it's already too late, right? You want to prevent that fire when you smell a little bit of smoke, not when there's a blazing inferno. So the first part is A-box. It's like if they're not there at least twice that week or whatever you require for them to come to class, you pick up the phone and you call them and say, hey, what's going on? Is there anything I can do to help? And they might say like, oh yeah, I've had like an injury and it's been nagging me, but all right, cool, let's get you in for a private lesson. That way we can make sure you stay on pace for your next bell, and then you solve the issue. Okay. Or maybe they're not liking a certain instructor and then make them come to a different class. Or maybe they don't know there's class on Saturdays because they never came that day, and they just switch their schedule. It would work. Okay. That's the first thing. And the second thing we'll do is what's called triage. I know almost no one does this, and I learned this from another industry. I don't remember which one, but it's simply going through your active list of students. And if you're around another type of business, it'd be your clients, and taking time. We do this every single week, but you probably do it every other week or something, but we do it every week. And the people who run that location just talk about each client. Okay. So they'll say like, okay, this client, how they do, let's say it's martial arts. So, oh, Johnny, how's he doing in class this past week? Oh, he's been really great. He's having trouble with this one kata or one movement. Okay, cool. He needs help with that. All right, let's make sure we help him when he next comes in. Okay, Alexa, how's she doing? Well, Alexa her grandma died a couple weeks ago, and she's been acting out in class a little bit the past couple weeks. Let's make sure that we know that that's happened with her and give her some grace in class. Okay, cool. What about the next person? And in that way, everyone in the staff is fully aware of what's happening with each client and with each member. Because sometimes one person knows and not the other person, and there's a disconnect in the communication. So just taking the time to actually talk about your clients, what's going well with them, and what challenges are. Once again, it doesn't have to be a 20-minute conversation about each person. And the first time you do it, it'll be a longer conversation. It might take a couple hours. But if you do it week after week, you don't have to talk about each person for many minutes. Usually it's like 30 seconds. Oh, this person told me they need a challenge. Okay, cool. Let's make sure we challenge them in the next class. Got it. Okay, move on. So A-Box and Triage, if you're a martial arts school owner, you need to be doing both of those if you want to keep your schools. And everyone thinks they have good retention, but unless you look at your numbers, they'll be like, oh, this month our attrition rate was 4%. It was like, yeah, but last month was 15%. So just because it's good this month doesn't mean you got to average it out over the course of a year, right? Is there anything else that you guys do in order for you to keep retention of your franchises?
We do a lot of calls with, it depends on the industry, but we have national calls more than any other franchisor. And in our tax business, for example, we're on the phone twice each week with invite everyone on saying, this is what you need to be focused on this week, because it's different things are happening in different times in the tax season. For example, when are W-2s hitting, right? And we'll announce that, okay, all McDonald's W-2s came out on January 7th, right? And so we're having constant conversation. And so you need to do, if you're going to do business to business marketing, you need to take a trip over to McDonald's and drop off some donuts or some pizza or something to the staff. So we're constant things that are happening, or special opportunities, that there is some disaster that creates a special tax situation that just happened that you need to alert your customers to. So we do much more communication on a national basis. And what happens is that every national company has a leader, and it's supposed to be the CEO, right? But your messages get diluted down to levels of management. And so it's like the communication game, the phone game, right? So if you want to get a standard national message, then the CEO's got to be on the call talking about, so everyone is understanding. There's no miscommunication. Everyone gets to hear from the CEO's mouth what is important right now.
I love that you said, like, okay, we're going to focus on one thing for the week. Because I think too often managers and CEOs, I've made this mistake so many times. And if you run a team, take note of this, is if you tell someone 5 things they're going to work on, they're going to do probably none of them. Okay. Or maybe some of them at like 10% capacity. But if you give them one thing to work on, and it's really hard to do sometimes because it's like, all these things are wrong, we got to fix them all. Okay. Yeah. But do one at a time. Okay. Okay. All this week, we're going to work on making sure that our instructors communicate with the parents and say something that their child did well in class that day. Or this week, we're going to make sure we actually mark off students' attendance on the iPad or a paper card if you use that. Right. But one thing per week. Otherwise, it creates complete overwhelm. And when we do our game film reviews, how we'll do it is we'll take a couple takeaways. So how we structure those meetings is like, okay, we'll do 3 takeaways from what we saw in the film. And then what are we going to look for next week? And then next week, when we watch that film review, we're looking through the filter of one thing that we want to get better. That way they can actually improve on that one thing for the following week. And that's the filter we look through. We're not looking to improve everything, one thing at a time. And as a young entrepreneur, I've made the mistake of just piling on people. And now I look back and go, yikes, I could have done a lot better. So what I want to know from you, because obviously you've been doing this for a lot longer and we're more seasoned, and Liberty Tax and Jackson Hewitt, it's weathered a lot of economic cycles. And I hear martial arts school owners talking all the time about them worrying about the economic downturn, and what might happen if there's a recession. They've been talking about a recession now for the last 10 years. It's going to happen any day now. So what advice would you give to a martial arts school owner who's maybe worried about economic downturns? They want to be able to not just like survive it but thrive during an economic downturn?
If you manage your money and your business well, then you actually grow more when times are tough than when times are bountiful. So, they say that a high tide rises, all boats rise in a high tide. And so it's a lot more difficult when things are good to grow than things are bad. So, or tough. So you have to tighten your belt and grab market share when others are facing adversity, maybe even going under. Maybe you have an opportunity to acquire a competitor or a competitor's customer list while they're struggling. So actually, if you know that a recession, it's not if there's going to be a recession, it's when. In my 55-year career, I've been through half a dozen recessions. So there's going to be a recession every 6 to 12 years, and you just have to be prepared and not overextended and not blowing all your money every week, and disciplined to manage your resources well, to have money in the bank when tough times come, because everyone's going to face adversity. I've never seen a person skate. So be prepared, and you will actually come out of the recession stronger than you went into the recession, typically.
And a lot of times they'll kind of cut the fat of an industry, right? If there's a recession, like if someone's not operating that well, they're done, right? If they don't have tight systems, they don't have money in the bank, right? They don't have a safety net. They're kind of done. And I'm never happy when a martial arts school fails. There have been times when a school's failed nearby, sometimes for many years. But then all of a sudden, that's like a windfall for our martial arts school, because we'll create a partnership with that person. So they hand over their students. And all of a sudden, we have 20 new students, or there's been locations that have gotten a lot more of ours that absorbed other schools at once. And then it's a giant windfall for them, right? Not proud that the business owner failed, but that's typically like has what happened, right? So like when you say they want to prepare, what exactly, like practically, as a martial arts school owner, what can I do to actually prepare? Is it like a certain amount of money and like a savings account, a certain percentage of my income? Like what do I actually do?
Well, yes, for sure. You have to set money aside into things like the best tax saving for a entrepreneur is typically a retirement plan, a KEO or a IRA, or to invest in a retirement plan. Because typically when you invest in a retirement plan, if you let's say you put $10,000 into a retirement plan, and you put in, because you're going to save $4,000 in taxes, it only costs, you put in 6 and the government puts in 4. And now you have $10,000 sitting there, and it's earning a decent rate of return. And if in an emergency, if you had a very, very tough time, you could pull it out with little or no penalty if you needed it in a disaster time. So you need tax advice, you need financial advice on what you should be doing with your money. But you always have to be careful not to overhire, splurge, waste in when times are good, right? You always have to be planning for adversity, and make sure you have X number of months put away, that if everything went wrong, if COVID comes and you're shut down for 6 months, that 7 months later, you're going to be able to reopen again. And part of that is the employees you have and how you treat your employees. I faced bankruptcy a couple times and had to go to my employees. In one year in 1988, everyone got a 50% pay cut, but it was short lived, because it was from May until January when the next tax season came. And so for 9 months they had to, and because I had such great loyal staff, and they could collect unemployment and do other things, we were able to weather the storm. But the most important thing to know is that a storm is coming, and there will be special opportunities, and you need to plan for your retirement anyway. I mean, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. And most people do not have a retirement. The average retirement savings in this country for a 50-year-old is $200. I mean, that's appalling. So you need to begin putting money in tax sheltered accounts. And again, there's a penalty for taking it out. But if it's a recession and you don't have any income, then the penalty goes away because you're going to save so much in taxes that it's already paid for. So let's pretend you went 10 years and put in 10,000 a year, and it cost you 6,000, and the government put in 4,000. So at the end of 10 years, you put in 60,000, the government's put in 40, and you have earned another 100,000 on the income of building up in interest and dividends from your portfolio. So you have 200,000 in the bank. It only cost you 60,000. Disaster comes and your revenue goes to zero. Now you take money out of it. Well, the tax on if your revenue income is zero and you take out $50,000, the tax on that is almost zero. And so now you still have 150,000 sitting there, and you have 50,000 you pay a 10% penalty, 5,000, and you have 45,000 to use on your business that saves you and enables you to grab market share because your competitors are not able to advertise. Many of them go out of business, and many of them are suffering. While you can prosper in tough times.
Mhm. Yeah, it always boggles my mind, I guess, because I have my brother and siblings have always pushed me to put money in retirement. I have a sister who's a financial planner for Fidelity, and my family, I would say, is like pretty savvy at just like saving and like really good at that. So I've been like kind of inundated with that idea since I was young. So I think there's two ways you can save, especially for a retirement account. I mean, obviously, if shit hits the fan, you don't want to take money out of your retirement because you're going to pay a penalty. Obviously, you prefer not to. So I think there should be generally, I think what experts will say is like you should have a rainy day fund, right? Which is like in a savings account that you don't touch ever. So, and it's supposed to have, I think the rule of thumb is like 6 months of expenses, right? Do you agree with that? Is that something you've heard before?
It's hard to get 6 months of expenses for most people, right?
Yeah.
Because most people are, 95% of people just can't do that. But I would say try it. I mean, it's a good goal, and I would say a minimum of three. It's but unfortunately, people don't have the discipline to do that in the United States.
Yeah, and maybe they don't have enough of a high income, which I totally understand. But obviously, like the goal is to save first before you spend, right? So it's not like, obviously, listen, if what you're making, you're spending all that on life's basic needs, you're stuck. Like I don't know what to tell you. But if you're
Right.
making some extra money and you don't need a newer car, or you don't need to go on vacation to Bahamas, you could go to a beach in you live in the United States somewhere drivable, right?
Like
Like
Virginia Beach.
having yeah, I mean, yeah, right. So like having money that is in your bank account that you'll be able to use in terms of a disaster that's not going to cost you a penalty. Like for me, I think it's like 50 grand I have in there that I built up over time, right? So, and now I know it just sits there, I don't touch it, and it's always there just in case. Okay. And then the other thing I think for saving for retirement is I like to do two things to make it, I would say, painless. And so I don't have to make a decision. If you have to make a decision every time you get a payroll check of, okay, I'm going to save $200 from this payroll check, but in my retirement, you're less likely to do it. So two ways to kind of make it mindless and easy, and I would say less painful, is one, make sure your payroll company puts in the money automatically before you ever get that check. And most payroll companies, and every payroll company will do that, right? So, like the first, when you get that payment check, a check in the mail or to your bank account, you don't have to transfer it somewhere else. You've already taken that money out for retirement and put a portion of it, and you can say, hey, I want them to do 10% or 20% or a certain, $500, whatever it is, automatically goes. You never see it, sits in a retirement account. Maybe you check it once or twice a year to make sure it's invested. Um, and the second thing that I do to make it extra easy for me is I like to try to max it out as soon in the beginning of the year as possible. So like for me, I'll do a higher percentage in January, February, March, and April That way the rest, and this is just like what I like to do. It's probably not the best financial thing because, but like what I like to do personally is like I like to know that my retirement account is funded first, and then the rest of the year that money is going directly to my account, and I know it's already funded. Okay. So, and obviously money is emotional, and from emotionally for me, that makes me feel better.
So let me give you a piece of tax advice that you may not
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
That
please.
and remember, I think a rainy day fund should. I'd rather have it be a tax savings fund than a non-tax savings fund.
Sure.
But when you're self-employed, you can contribute money all the way till April 15 and count it towards last year's deduction.
Hmm.
So if you're taking money in 2025 and you're saying you're funding it all before April 15, you can take a deduction from the previous year. So
Mm.
you can immediately get a savings of a prior year savings. And so that $10,000 you put in, only you get 4,000 of it back.
Mm. Very cool. I don't know if my accountant does that. I'll have to ask. I assume, but who knows? I don't really
You
check.
should assume that they don't.
Assume that they don't. Right? Yeah. Um, yeah. Like hope for the best, but always check. So what I want to know from you is what's like one business book if you're gonna give someone, one of your clients, one of your friends, one business book if they're new in their entrepreneurial journey, or the business book that has made the biggest impact on your life. Which one would you recommend?
Well, how about my book? That's made the biggest impact on my life. How I
Sure,
compete.
sure.
If your listeners want a copy, they can just reach out to me on loyaltybrands.com and we'll send them a free book.
Oh,
But
great.
there, I love everything Dale Carnegie. Um, but those are simple business suggestions. Peter Drucker is the most complex business author that I would recommend on complex issues. So I would recommend anything Dale Carnegie on simple issues, and anything complex, Peter Drucker.
Mhm. What's the biggest thorn in your side in working with loyalty brands or franchisees or CEOs? Like, what's like the one thing that like just like hurts the most that like bothers you, and you wish if they followed this one thing, it'd be so much better.
Well, after 55 years, nothing really hurts anymore, right?
Okay.
Because I've been through it all. I can tell you my biggest disappointments are my biggest failure was I've never been able to change anyone's attitude. Number one, that I can change their attitude for a day, a week, a month, an hour, but they pop right back into. So you have to hire people for attitude, not for skill. Tom Watson Sr., the founder of IBM, said, "Give me 100 great engineers or 100 people with great attitudes. I'll take the people with great attitudes because you can teach engineering, you can't teach attitude." So that's been frustrating, but and this isn't frustrating anymore because it's so typical. No one listens 100%. Our job as a franchisor is to give you a system that's foolproof, best in the industry, world class, state of the art. We have things that set us apart that make us better than anyone else. Your job as a franchisee is to listen. And out of the 5,200 people I brought in, none of them listen. And so the phrase that I've used most of my whole life is just follow the system. Just follow the system. I say that so often. So that's the most frustrating thing, but I'm used to it. So it's after 55 years of business, and I've had hundreds of thousands of employees in my offices, in my 10,000 offices. So after seeing human nature, nothing aggravates me anymore. I'm used to it. But just they say smart people learn from their mistakes. I don't know very many smart people. They say wise people learn from the mistakes of others, and that's what you're giving great advice, even in the advice you've given today with to other owners of studios, and they need to listen. But I would say that typically on a call like this, where I'll have 50 people, 100 people, 200 people, that I'm only going to impact one or two or three people. Most people are just going to shrug it off and know better.
Yeah. And because you're kind of like a coach or a consultant in loyalty brands, right? Like it kind of does it all. And it's funny because like all the information you could ever want in the entire world is available on the internet or on YouTube, right?
Right.
But like it comes off different when you're paying someone to get advice from. Like if people want to learn how to grow their school organically, I've posted enough videos and podcasts about it, like how to do it. But like until they pay someone to be okay, I want to make this happen. Like when you pay attention, right? And B, like if you just followed it like step by step and stop trying to reinvent the wheel, or stop trying to put like what I tell people is kind of it's like baking a cake. Like if you're gonna bake a cake, the first time you do it, you follow the recipe. You don't, and after you do bake the cake 100 times, then you might say, "Oh, you know what? I've done it 100 times. I kind of get it now. This time I'm gonna add a little more butter or a little less baking soda." And then you can change it. Like once you already have done it a million times, but too often they try to change the ingredients way too soon before they even know exactly what works and what's right? Before you can innovate. Uh, I would say as a coach, it's always the most frustrating thing is like, because I have a guarantee with like my offer where I help people, but my guarantee is solely based on them doing the work I tell them to do. And I'm like, listen, if you don't do the work and put in the effort, and here's the things you need to do, I guarantee you're not going to get the results. But if you do the work, 100% you'll get the results. I know it's done too many times. So thank you so much for being on here. So if someone wants to reach out to you and get help or find out more information about loyalty brands, how do they find you?
It's loyaltybrands.com.
Cool. Thank you so much for being on here. My name is Matthew Brenner. If you are a martial arts school owner and you want to learn how to grow your school organically, so without relying on paid advertising or a fancy website or a perfect CRM or an AI chatbot that does everything for you, and you want to take control of your business and grow your school organically, yeah, you can reach out to me, Matthew, at wdojo.com, or visit wdojo.com, and you'll see how we do the Triangle Codex, which is our 3-step system to grow schools organically. So you can start doing it right now. Talk to you guys later. Bye, guys.